What's up? See what I did there? Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm James the Color Guy from the Paint People, and today we're talking about an often overlooked design element, your ceiling. Believe it or not, painting your ceiling can have a totally dramatic impact on the overall look and feel of your home. Today we're going to explore some different approaches you can take and the incredible design impact all these things can have on your home. Before we do that, press that like button for me, subscribe if you haven't already, and click that little bell icon so you can stay notified whenever we have a new video or a live stream, which I've been having a lot of fun with. Hope you have too. So let's start with the importance of a painted ceiling. We often focus on walls and flooring and trim colors, but it's the ceiling that plays a pretty crucial role in defining the atmosphere of a room. If you think about it, your ceilings, they take up a lot of visual space, a ton of square footage at your disposal. And more often than not, most of the ceiling is going to be exposed versus your floor, which could have furniture on it, area rugs, your walls, which could have artwork or mirrors on them. So really, when you think about it, the ceiling is pretty much open for business, right? It is a huge panel that is open, nothing's blocking it, maybe the odd light fixture there, but that's a great opportunity to add some more flavor to your space. A painted ceiling can create a sense of height, especially if you're going with a darker color, which can visually raise the height of the room. It could also add a ton of brightness if you go with a lighter color, because it'll reflect a ton of light back into the room, which I think is really important. It could also be a great way to add a clear focal point by going with a bold or a contrasting color on the ceiling, which can draw your attention and create that focal point. A painted ceiling can also enhance your mood, right? Depending on what you like. A bright white ceiling can create this open feeling, this airiness, and a darker color can just create a bit of drama, a bit of a moodiness, some sophistication. So it can really change the vibe of a room pretty quickly. So what are some different approaches to painting your ceiling? The first one is monochromatic. So this would be painting your ceiling the same exact color as your walls, which really creates a cohesive, seamless look that I think can be pretty attractive depending on the color you choose. It's not the most common choice unless you're a pesky landlord, but I recently painted a condominium, same walls, same ceilings, but it was decorator's white by Benjamin Moore. So I guess in that case, if you're going for just a clean, simple look, monochromatic could be the way to go. The other option, which is probably the most popular choice, would be a white ceiling. Traditional, reflects the most amount of light. By going with a bright white ceiling, you're going to have a really clean look, especially if you have anything other than white on the walls. That'll give you some nice contrast, and it'll just make the space feel brighter, which I think is what a lot of people do want. The next option is going with coordinating colors. So using a ceiling color that coordinates nicely and slots in with your wall paint color, but maybe it's a little bit darker or a little bit lighter for a more subtle change. So essentially, you're not going white, you're going with a paint color, but it's a paint color specifically chosen to work alongside your wall color. This will give you some contrast as well, but not as stark of a contrast if you went with a white ceiling, or I guess a black ceiling. A little more of a neighborly color. And then of course you have accent ceilings, which is painting a ceiling with a really bold or complementary contrasting color to make it a true focal point in the room. And especially if you're going with those dark colors, not only will it catch your eye, but it could also make your room feel that much taller. So if you have an abundance of natural light coming in or floor lighting that can really just pump in as much light as possible, maybe you can afford to paint your ceiling darker, give you that feeling of height and also kind of that stylish look. And then of course you have textured ceilings. Not necessarily talking about popcorn, stucco, right? But you can use a textured paint or even a lime wash coating on your ceiling to give it a unique and visually interesting effect. This is not something I see too often. It's normally reserved for walls where you can actually take advantage of feeling that texture. But I don't see a reason why you can't add texture to your ceiling as well to just give you a little more visual intrigue. Okay, so if you're deciding to paint your ceiling, what are some important factors to consider? The first one, I think, is finish, sheen. A flat or a matte finish on your ceiling will do a much better job at hiding imperfections than a glossy paint would. Although I have seen some high gloss finishes on ceilings look okay. They do reflect light, so it can make your room feel bigger, sort of like how a mirror does, but they will absolutely show every single little scratch, bump, any imperfection possible the glossier you go. So normally a good quality ceiling paint will be ultra flat as possible. That's normally what I recommend for most people. The next consideration is durability. While normally a big perk that we talk about when it comes to paint, it's a huge advantage to have something really durable. But really, a ceiling paint doesn't necessarily need to be that durable because it's unlikely to be touched day to day like a wall or a trim might. So I guess it's a bonus to have some extra washability on your ceiling if you do want to get up there to clean, but you don't necessarily need it as much as you think. One thing that I think is even more important than durability is the actual texture of the paint itself. I find a good ceiling paint will usually have a higher viscosity or a thickness, so it's less likely to feel runny with, unsightly drips. You don't want any of that when you're painting a ceiling. You want it to be as smooth as possible. And this will really help in the application process because it is super important to nail your ceiling because it is so visible all the time. If there are some drips and drops and lines, it's going to look awful. So a good quality ceiling specific paint will usually help alleviate a lot of these issues, assuming you're applying it properly. And then an underrated thing to sort of keep out for is low VOC paint. So whenever I'm picking a ceiling paint, I do tend to gravitate towards those green friendly, low VOC, reduced harmful emission paints, like the ones that basically don't smell as bad because the ceiling is a large surface area. And if you get a paint that's stinky, no one's happy about that. So what about some ceiling design ideas? Here are a few to inspire you if you want to go a little further than paint. You have your coffered ceilings, which add an architectural interest, which could also be painted with a contrasting color for a nice dramatic effect. You have beamed ceilings, get those exposed beams going to add a rustic or an industrial touch to a room. And even if you don't have architectural beams that you can use necessarily, you can always add them in and kind of fake it. I've seen it done and it looks pretty good. You can leave them unpainted, which I think I prefer, or give them a nice contrasting color for another bold sort of statement. I've also seen stenciled ceilings where people use stencils to create different patterns and effects. I'm not super talked about, but is something you could technically do. And then finally, wallpapered ceilings. Another one of those things that you immediately think of, even though it's called wallpaper, you can use it as ceiling paper too. It's a little trickier to apply, but it can really add a beautiful texture and pattern that paint alone probably can't do unless you have excellent fine art skills or a muralist locally that's really good. Painting your ceiling is a simple yet effective way to transform the look and feel of your room or your home. And you got to consider the color, the finish, the design elements so you can create a space that is both functional and visually appealing. I hope this helped you. See you on the next video.